Good morning, everyone. Kalimera. During my senior year of the seminary, I was fortunate enough to be able to visit Mount Athos with my classmates. Mount Athos is a holy place located on a peninsula in the northeastern region of Greece, and it is occupied only by monks and monasteries. I had heard of Mount Athos for years, and I was very excited to finally visit this very holy place myself. My classmates and I had an amazing experience. We stayed at a specific monastery, which is known for hosting visitors, or as they are called on Mount Athos, pilgrims. And there was a large dormitory building with many rooms that housed all of us pilgrims together. My seminarian classmates and I were mixed into this dormitory building with the other pilgrims who were mostly old men from Greece. Now, it was my first time on Mount Athos, so I, of course, assumed that everyone who visited Mount Athos did everything the same way. My classmates and I went to every church service every day, of which there were many. But I quickly began to realize that these other pilgrims, the old men from Greece, had completely different priorities of things they were going to do while they were on Mount Athos. Every time my seminarian classmates and I would walk to and from the main church for services, we would walk by the back door of the kitchen and we would see the other pilgrims peeling potatoes instead of going to the services. On a tour of the monastery, one of the monks showed us a beautiful balcony which jutted out right over the sea, and he told us that this was a perfect place to pray. But every time my classmates and I tried to go to this large balcony, it was always already occupied by the other pilgrims who are using it to smoke cigarettes. There was also a Nescafe vending machine in the lobby of the dorm building, and my friends and I were very excited to use it. But by the time we dropped off our bags in our rooms and went back down to the lobby, we had discovered that the other pilgrims had already drunk up all of the coffee from the machine, and it would not be restocked until the following week. Now, at all the meals on Mount Athos, everyone sits together at big communal tables. The monks were at the tables in the front of the room, and the pilgrims sat all together at the tables in the back half of the room. So my seminarian brothers and I were mixed in with these other pilgrims. And on Mount Athos, you don't start eating until one of the monks rings a little bell. You actually can't even touch the food until this bell rings. And since it was Mount Athos, I assumed that it would be a very calm dining experience. But as soon as that little bell rang, all of the Greek men would snatch the food away from me and my classmates and chow down before we could even reach for a piece of bread. My favorite memory of these other pilgrims was one morning around 10 a.m. after the other seminarians and I had been at an 8-hour prayer service all night long. We had finally returned to our rooms to sleep after being awake all night. But outside my room, there was a small communal balcony also overlooking the ocean. And my roommates and I had our windows open because, of course, it was summer and very hot. So after being awake for almost 2 days straight, I finally began to doze off. And as I dozed off, I noticed the faint smell of cigarette smoke coming through the window. I thought this was strange, but I ignored it and I began to sleep. Then all of a sudden, I was awakened by the loud sound of a Kalimera, as I had discovered there was a Greek man sitting on the balcony, FaceTiming a friend of his to show him the view of the ocean. And with his gruff smoker's voice, he went on and on for almost an hour on the phone, while my friends and I were so delirious that we gave up trying to sleep, and we simply laughed at this conversation going on right outside our window. Now, that memory was a funny one for me and for my friends while we were on Mount Athos, but I have to admit that these other pilgrims really did begin to bother me. Here we were on perhaps one of the holiest places on earth, and these guys were, in one way or another, ruining the spiritual vibe for the rest of us. I remember even thinking, what are these guys doing here at all? It seems they don't care about church, they don't care about the services, they don't care about the monks, nothing. I admit that I was very unhappy by the way these other pilgrims were behaving, and my classmates felt the same way. Then before the end of our trip, all of us seminarians had an opportunity to meet with one of the monks who happened to speak English. He wanted to sit down with us and ask if we had any questions about Mount Athos or the monastic life. And one of us asked him, "Father, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced when you first became a monk here at the monastery?" His response certainly resonated with me. The monk said, "When I first came to Mount Athos, I was very frustrated by the pilgrims." I almost fell out of my chair when he said this, and I said, "Me too." The monk went on, "I couldn't believe that they would come here just to peel potatoes all day long. It bothered me very much that they would not go to the services or to confession or anything." And this monk admitted that he was so irritated by this that he went to go talk to the abbot or the head monk or elder of the monastery. The elder said to the younger monk, "The sad fact is that most of these men lead very, very difficult lives in Greece. We have no idea what difficulties await them, and when they return home, or we have no idea what difficulties await them when they return home from their visit here on Mount Athos. So perhaps," said the elder, "to these men simply being on Mount Athos and peeling potatoes is the greatest spiritual refreshment they can attain. The healing grace of God reaches every person in the way that they are able to receive it, so let them peel their potatoes." In our gospel passage today, Christ comes across a woman, and it says she had a spirit of infirmity for 18 years. An infirmity is defined as a physical or spiritual weakness. And it says she was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. In other words, something in her life was literally and physically weighing her down, so much so and for so long that she could not be herself. And while Christ had mercy on and compassion on her and he healed her, the rest of the people in that society during that time seemingly did not care that she had this difficulty. In fact, the ruler of the synagogue, a very predominant person in that society, even criticized Jesus Christ for healing her because he had done so on the Sabbath. He was very upset that Jesus had healed outside the usual parameters and had not followed the set rules. But of course, as we know, Jesus defends himself and his actions, and he puts the ruler of the synagogue in his place and everyone else around criticizing, so much so that it says all of his adversaries were put to shame. Who are we to assume how God might be working in someone else's life? And who are we to perhaps judge someone else's life and how they live it all together? Sadly, I had judged the actions of these other pilgrims without really knowing what might be causing them to behave the way that they did. However, it was clear that the elder of the monastery knew exactly why these men do what they did, and he knew the reality and the difficulty of their lives. Only God truly knows what each and every one of us is going through. Not even some of our closest friends or family members may know the trials and tribulations someone close to them might be facing, but God certainly does. And therefore, God reaches each person the best way that he can. Christ reached and healed the woman today, even though it did not follow the approved methods for that society at that time. So perhaps we can use today's gospel passage as a suggestion and a reminder to take a step back when we look around at our church, at our places of work, and even at our schools, and not judge the other people we see for things they might do or not do. Perhaps they have things going on in their lives that we know nothing about. Let us simply pray that God is coming to them as he comes to the old men peeling potatoes on Mount Athos and the woman in today's gospel passage and heals them. Perhaps we can altogether focus less on other people and more on our own relationship with God and Jesus Christ so that they may heal us of the infirmities that we certainly deal with. It's hard enough to focus on God, and it can become almost impossible if we spend our time focusing instead on other people. So let us worry more about our own connection with God and pray that he heals those around us in the ways that work for them. When Jesus saw the woman, he called her and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your infirmity." And he laid his hands upon her, and immediately she was made straight, and she praised God. Amen.